everybody. Welcome to the Straight Outta BS podcast. Thank you guys for the continued support. Please keep on sharing the videos, liking them, commenting, and let's keep on getting the word out about these places and get them shut down. Thank you to my Patreon members. Thank you to listener support. Thank you to members on my channel. You guys are awesome. It's never expected, so it's always really appreciated. And so links are in the description for that. I want to do a moment of silence for the person still struggling with intrusive thoughts or addiction or anything. So on the count of three, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you went and what year.
My name is Nick, and I was at both Ascent and CEDU from late 1990 or early 1994 through probably winter 95, 96. Exact dates are kind of fuzzy.
Okay. And walk us through like how your childhood was and like what led up to you going to the program.
Childhood, I mean, I guess it was mostly normal. I just have like weapons grade ADHD and caused a lot of problems until that got diagnosed and medicated when I was in elementary school. My problems really started in middle school when I wasn't on the ADHD meds anymore, because I had developed depression symptoms, and so the psychiatrist put me on a series of increasingly failing antidepressants. And that sort of culminated with being put on Paxil at like 13 or 14, which was not recommended to be prescribed to adolescents at all. And I believe the company later faced lawsuits about pushing it. And that, I mean, looking back on it, it just kind of really messed up the way I was thinking. Mm-hmm. And I would say and do things that, you know, I would think normally I would not. And I was getting into fights at school, and eventually that resulted in being asked to leave the school, you know, go find a different school. And my parents were not happy about that.
Okay.
Eventually, I got sent to a military school in Carlsbad, California, called Army and Navy Academy, which I was kind of stoked to go to because it's like Carlsbad's super nice and it's on the beach, and you know, all the structure was good for me, and it had a good school, but there were, I hate to use the word gangs, but like there were like groups of kids who were just beating up on people all the time. And I had a friend who was targeted by them, and like we were hanging out one night and they came in and just like whooped his ass, and he ended up getting like a bunch of stitches in his head. Like it felt like I was the only person that wanted to be there, you know? And so everybody else was like miserable, and they, you know, took it out on everybody. And that sort of led to just like I had a really bad week between that happening and Kurt Cobain killing himself. This was 1983. It was like 30 years ago, earlier this month, right?
Yep.
And like I was just mentally broken at that point, and called my parents, and I was like, you know, this shit's going down, and like I'd rather like kill myself than stay here. And that sort of kickstarted it all. I was hospitalized, and then eventually I was sent to a wilderness program in Montana, which was called Expeditions, I think.
Okay.
And I mean, it was pretty like standard fare. Like there wasn't a lot of philosophy and self-help and emotional growth stuff. It was just like walk your ass through the mud, carrying a pack. And I was fucking miserable because it was awful. Like I might have liked it if it was in the summer or something, but it was like spring and muddy, and it was just awful. And um, like I tried to strangle myself with a tent rope one night, and someone saw me, and I got sent to another hospital. I think it was in Idaho. And from there, that's when I went to Ascent, which I'm not sure how much you know about Ascent or not, but it's like living in teepees and PT every morning and chopping wood and sawing logs all day. Like in a way, it was sort of like summer camp because it was like the middle of the summer, and I wouldn't have been in school anyway. Um, but it was used as both like punishment and as a feeder into the CEDU school system. So there were people there that were being punished at another CEDU school and sent off here. And then there were people who had never heard of CEDU schools and been put into this place. And I was one of the latter group. I think this was like May or June of 1994. The place was run like by a bunch of ex-military people and hippies. And it was like a really weird dynamic. They had this pseudo Native American spirituality kind of vibe going. There weren't a lot of rules. Like we used to talk about music and all kinds of stuff. You slept in a teepee, and it kind of sucked. But it could have been worse, as I found out, a year and a half later or so. And pretty much the entire time I was there, I was hearing from the other kids that were there, like, oh, this is the start. Like you're gonna end up at CEDU for sure, or Provo, one of the two. And I had no idea, no idea about any of this. I kind of pictured like an old school reform school where they just whoop your ass all day. And I begged my parents, like, please do not send me to this place. If you send me to this place, I will run away. Every opportunity I get. And none of that persuaded them. And so I was sent off to CEDU in probably September of that year, 94. September, October, somewhere around there. It wasn't quite winter.
And did you go home before you went to CEDU, or did you go straight from Ascent to CEDU?
No, there was a stretch of a few months at home between.
Okay, and just continued to go downhill? Just you weren't really feeling good and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, well, at this point, I was just happy to have running water again.
Mm-hmm.
And like sleep in a bed and not have to like ask to use the potty. So that was enough for a few months, and like I never had like a tour of CEDU or anything. It was just like my parents took me up there and dropped me off, and that was it.
Do you know? Go
I
ahead.
knew I was going, and I just kind of accepted it because I was like, how bad could it be compared to this, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So they told you that they were going to send you there after you got back from Ascent?
yeah.
Okay, so they already knew that they were going to be sending you there. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it required a lot of persuasion from from whoever was the parent outreach team at Ascent. Um, like, they were a feeder organization to get people into the other schools. So uh, I'm sure they tried their damnedest.
Yeah. What do you remember? At Ascent, was there like what was the structure of the program like? Were there was it essentially just like labor and stuff like that, and they pretty much chose when you were ready to leave, or?
It was a 6-week program, which included a 2-week course, which was just like a backpacking trip um, in the sort of neighboring mountains in Idaho. And that summer, the first time I was there, I had an ingrown toenail, and so I couldn't go when I was supposed to, and I ended up there an extra 2 weeks. So it was like 2 weeks. You just kind of like get the deal of what's going on, and then a backpacking trip, and then you come back and it's 2 more weeks of, I guess, them convincing your parents to send you to a CEDU school. But it was run very much like a military boot camp. Um, you you get woken up in the morning, you check in, audibly yell, and you do a head count, and you check in. You had to have all your stuff stowed away in a perfect little pile, or they would, come in and undo it and make you do it again. Um, and after that, there was like a breakfast and PT and water hauls because we didn't have running water or pump or anything. So we had to carry these 5-gallon buckets of water, like a mile and a half down a trail. And then, I mean, there was no fun time. It was like as long as it was daylight, you were working, you were doing something. Whether it was chopping down a tree, you were sawing logs, you were splitting wood. Um, maybe you had kitchen duty or something, Um, but it was always making you do something. There was always up your ass about something, just like a boot camp.
Okay. And what do you think the hardest part about being at Ascent was for you?
I mean, it was kind of miserable, but also not. Like, it sucked having to be there, and it sucked that, like, you didn't take a shower but once every 6 weeks. It was like your reward for completing the backpacking trip was you got a hot shower in like this Friday the 13th looking cabin. And that was, I mean, like the dirtiness and the work was really hard, but it wasn't so hard that I couldn't do it easily, right? Um, I feel like I picked up some valuable wood-related skills.
Hmm.
Um, but again, physically, it was just hard because you were worked all day long.
Okay, so it was more demanding on your body, like physically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you didn't get a moment's rest. And the only places to sit were stumps, other than like in the mess hall or whatever. The only places to sit were stumps, and some of them were like that big. So everywhere you were uncomfortable somehow, and you were always dirty.
Yeah. How many people were there when you got there, if you had to estimate at Ascent, and then how many people were there when you left, if you had to estimate?
I don't think they could accommodate more than like 20 kids at a time then, because there
Okay.
was one TP for the boys and one TP for the girls, and I don't think there was more than 15 or so the entire time I was there.
Okay.
And it was like a 2-to-1 staff to kid ratio.
Okay. And was it co-ed?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And so how did the transport from Ascent to, or never mind, you went back home. How
Yeah.
did the transport to CEDU go once you went? Like, how did you get there?
My parents took me.
Okay.
They had already decided what was going to happen, and so, you know, I didn't really have much choice at that point. And uh, they just took me up there and dropped me off. Like, I didn't really get a tour or a preview of what was to come. It was just, I was just there now.
What do you remember about when you first got there? Do you remember if they buddied you up with anybody? Did they give you anything physical for a role manual to show you like the ropes? What do you remember about when you first got there?
I mean, truth is, I probably don't remember much because it was such a whirlwind.
Okay.
Um, but for sure, a few things happened, which was I was given a rule book. Um, wasn't all that long. The main rules were no sex, no drugs, no violence. And other than trying to communicate anything about your life previous to CEDU, there wasn't a whole lot of very strict rules. There was like a dress code. You had, different occasions for different dress, things that you were allowed to wear. But inside of that, it was kind of free form, like collared shirt, pants, and tuck them in, right?
Hmm.
Um, I was probably strip searched, but I don't remember that happening. Um, I was partnered up with they call it a big brother. Um, I suppose I got a tour then, like this is this place and this is that place, and don't do this, don't do that, and if you know anybody here, don't talk to them. Um, and was given a dorm, a bed in a dorm, and that was pretty much it. They had like a structure of levels there, but they also had like teams or families, and I sort of remember being in the first like family meeting I was when I got there, and it's like your soul is leaving your body, and you can see everything in the third person. Like I could not believe what was happening. It was weird, and got weirder.
Definitely. You how many people were there when you got there? And how many people were there when you left, if you had to estimate?
it might be as many as like 60 or 70.
Okay.
There was also a middle school, which is kind of down the road. And there was another facility that was for 18 plus. Probably all together it was, a little over 100.
Okay.
I'm thinking. But I don't know for sure.
Okay. And how long were you there total?
Probably like 15 months, something like that. I never really like bought into the program. I was trying to figure out how I can kind of go along with things and not make too many waves, right? Because the last thing you want is to be noticed.
Yeah. Yep.
But that is in the structure of their program, it was impossible because they would find something. If you were following all the rules, they had a term for it. You're a look good. You're just following the rules so you won't get in trouble. Like that was like something they would accuse you of. I was like, yes, well, like fucking obviously. Like why would I want to be in trouble?
Yeah.
And the rules were difficult to define a lot of the time.
By design.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, everything there was by design. They had a playbook and they executed it very well, which is why they, were like the premier emotional growth boarding school that, spawned 1,000 copies. They made a lot of money, and they were really good at tricking parents and mind fucking kids.
Were you were on medications before you went there? I'm curious, did they load you up with more prescriptions, or did they take you off of them when you got to CEDU?
I got the feeling they didn't really believe in mental illness to an extent. Certainly not what I had, because we can just program that out of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they really truly believed that most mental illnesses could be cured with this program. At some point, I was put on lithium.
Interesting.
Which, I mean, there was zero reason for other than to make me docile.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it worked.
Was there something that sparked that happening, or was it just random one day they decided to put you on lithium?
Well, maybe I should back up a bit. One of the reasons that it took a long time for my parents to get me up to CEDU was because they used LAUSD and the county Department of Mental Health to help fund it.
Okay, interesting.
So I had an IEP, and they went through all the process of all the meetings, and somehow they got some portion of the tuition covered.
Not surprising, but interesting.
But it came with like some clauses
Mm-hmm.
on CEDU's end, right? Which was I had to have an accredited teacher for schooling, and I had to continue with psychiatrist visits. And I mean, I had been in therapy since I was in the 4th grade or so to get the diagnosis and everything. And never once did I ever have a therapist I thought who was unbiased or on my side even. They were always taking my parents' side about everything. And eventually, like, why even say anything? 'Cause it's just going to be something that I did wrong. It's going to turn around on me. And it's like the culture at the time was less aware of mental health issues than now.
Hmm.
It was like 10, 20 years before then, you had latchkey kids and like kids roaming the streets all the time.
Yep.
So um, beating your kids wasn't considered abnormal, right?
Yep.
And the transition just in the culture at large about this has been huge in my lifetime. To
Yep.
go from like beating your kids is child abuse, when before it was just something that was done. It was just, it is what it is.
Hmm.
Everyone gets whooped.
Yep.
And the awareness of mental health conditions, um, and the research and effort that's been put into ADHD by a lot of people has really opened that one up too. Uh,
Definitely. I have ADHD too. I was diagnosed at about age 5, so I'm like right there with you. I was the same kind of thing.
yeah, the, just like the general knowledge about it now is orders of magnitude compared to when, I was a kid,
Yeah.
or even in the 90s. And I don't think they believed particularly that it was a thing at CEDU. They certainly understood that there were like very drastic mental illnesses,
Hmm.
um, but being, you know, not neurotypical or having ADHD, or if you were on the spectrum or something, I'm not sure that they believed in it if you were still high functioning enough. So it's at some point in that process of seeing the psychiatrist, that's when I was put on lithium.
Okay.
Uh, the like, excuse me, the school itself, they really went through a lot of effort to upend your reality. They changed the meanings of words. They own the vocabulary while you're there, and only the people who are there can talk in this language and use those words and understand the meaning. And it really does a number on your ability to negotiate your life while you're there.
Definitely.
Um, like the program itself was, people say it was based in synanon. It was very similar. It was started by somebody who had tangential relation to synanon, um, but it used attack therapy and uh, screaming at the floor kind of stuff, which all of it like seemed insane to me. The first time I went into what they called a WRAP, which was the 3 times a week um, attack therapy session. Did you have something like that?
Yeah, we would have smaller individual groups, and that would be attack therapy. And then when we did the seminars, that would be like attack therapy on steroids.
Yeah. So your seminar is probably close to what CEDU called profits, which were
Yep.
uh,
Required to graduate, correct?
yeah, and
Yep.
well, required to advance, throughout, what level, whatever level you were in, or to get to the next stage where you could, join the other people that had already advanced.
Yeah.
They were like 24, 48-hour workshops, and they they started usually like with some kind of like tension breaking thing, um, and then you had a rap, which got kind of brutal, usually, because this was like the group of people you went through all of these things with, and you got to know each other pretty well. And if you attack other people, then you are less likely to get attacked.
Yeah, self-preservation.
Right.
It puts you in instant self-preservation mode. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, there are people who are just, predatory about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And then there's people that get off on it for sure. Yep.
Usually these workshops were like themed, and the theme carried through whatever sort of like mental, emotional journey they thought you should go on. And they played music very, very loudly, like where you couldn't hear what anyone was saying unless they were absolutely yelling at the top of their lungs. And I mean, as someone where music's an important part of my life, having trauma and abuse with the music is very disturbing for me, because like a song will come on and I will retreat inside my head to, so I don't freak out.
Yeah.
It's like I'm just frozen.
Does that happen for like music in general, just period, or just specific songs?
It's specific songs that they used in the climax of a workshop, or maybe just repeated it endlessly throughout the workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually they went along with the theme. And also, I really was not a fan of most of the music, which,
Yeah.
is like folk music and Neil Diamond and whatever. Like I really hate James Taylor now.
Yeah.
I played a lot of James Taylor. What was the workshop? And once you had been through, running through this 3-act play in this workshop, you would be received by the rest of the students, because you had just completed such a arduous and wonderful task, and you've grown so much, and lots of platitudes. Like most of it felt very phony to me, because I did not develop deep and meaningful friendships in this place because you couldn't, without being in trouble somehow.
Yeah.
It was safer to hide in the open. So most of the time, that's what I was trying to do. And you get these like notes afterwards, like, "Oh, you're such a great person, and you went through this whole thing," and it's, you don't know me from Adam, and you see how effusive they are about congratulating you, and then you see it happen to other people.
Yeah, it's love bombing.
And you realize how fake and phony it is.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, maybe some of these people believed it, but in my case, it was always very off-putting.
And what phase or level did you make it to in the program? Did you graduate?
I did not graduate. I probably got halfway, 3/4 through or something. But as promised, I ran away many times. And one time I ran away, and I was just kind of like hanging out on them, because it's on the top of this mountain in San Bernardino County. And like I was just chilling in the forest for a couple days until I got really hungry, and then I uh, I broke into the profit room where they kept. I knew they kept like caffeinated beverages there because you couldn't have like sugar beverage or caffeinated things while you were there. And like all I wanted was a Coke, like so badly. And I got into this room, and not only did they have like caffeinated beverages and little snacks, but they had like all the scripts for all the profits. And so I spent the night like consuming that and reading through things.
Interesting.
And I got in pretty big trouble for that one. I think the next profit that I went through, like they had to pull me aside and say like don't say anything about this part and that part and that part.
Interesting.
Um, so I think I was in, what do they call it? Challenge, I think, which was either the middle or the penultimate level that you would get to. And I ran away. It must have been for like the third or fourth time.
Mhm.
And they were just like, you're going back to Ascent. And uh, the problem this time is the place had changed. The staff was completely different. The philosophy was completely different.
What about it was different?
It was CEDU-ified. Like they,
Stricter or
oh
or
yes, oh yes. Like they knew the rules at the other CEDU schools now, and they enforced those rules. So like you can talk about music or anything else, um, which was very different the first time I was there. The work was harder because it was the middle of winter.
okay.
And then the backpacking trip was like snowshoes and digging out 3, 4, waist high snow just to put your tent down. Um,
Did anybody get hypothermia or frostbite?
no, no, I think everyone pretty much like wanted to stay safe and live.
Yeah,
Um, uh, but it was brutal,
I'll bet.
and the work was more brutal. Um, the treatment was more degraded and humiliating than previous. If they thought you were a flight risk um, at night, instead of being able to sleep in the teepee, they would have you get into your sleeping bag without your boots, fully clothed, and then they would lay you down on a tarp and they would roll the tarp up, and they called it a burrito, and you would sleep there all night. And they were they're very joyous as they wrapped you up, you know. They did it with
Okay.
a lot of verve and excitement. Um, they really got a kick out of being assholes to kids
What makes you think? What makes you say that? Like, what about them?
because they were so happy. I mean, it was miserable. You know, it's like North Idaho, the middle of winter. It's like 10 below zero
They're just smiling.
in the day. Yeah, and you know they get to sit there in their chairs and tell you to do shit. And if you do something wrong, you know, God forbid you make a sudden movement, with 3 guys on top of you, restraining you. And I mean, there was one particular guy that was a real hard ass. And I don't know what his problem was. Like, I think maybe he was just like, he was huge. And so he thought he could, you know, bully everyone. Um, but I mean, it was miserable.
I'll bet. How long were you there the second time?
Second time I was there for 6 weeks.
Okay.
And either CEDU Running Springs had asked me not to come back or asked my parents for me not to come back, or someone had convinced them that I should have gone to one of these other schools in Idaho. But my parents weren't really going for it. And my mom, who had traveled up there to pick me up, tried to get me to stay in, like, agreed to everything, like, oh, I'll be the best little CEDU kid. I'll do all the things, you know, and I'll be great. She's like, please, just do this for me. And then she told me that I had to because she had bone cancer. And it would really mean a lot if I just did this for her. And I was like, fuck no. You know, like, you have bone cancer? Like, there's no fucking way I'm going back there. I'm going home.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to, like, waste my time with you being in this awful, wretched place that I blame you for putting me in.
Yeah.
Eventually, while my parents decided what we were going to do, I was taken home. And then on the flight home, my mom told me that she did not, in fact, have bone cancer.
Of course.
She had just said that to try to get me to stay and be a good boy. I don't know who put her up to it, because it doesn't really seem like something she would do, but who knows? You never know with people.
Yeah. That's it. Very strange.
And at some point, as we were driving home from the airport, I had convinced my dad that staying home was the best thing. And eventually they agreed to try it, and so I was home and not going back. After that, I was in, like, an IEP non-public school for high school, and I was back on Ritalin, and everything, you know, everything turned out okay from there on. Like, I looked through some of the what little I have left, because I came home from North Idaho, so whatever things had been in Running Springs, someone there had packed them up and either shipped them or my parents came to get them. And, like, I have very few artifacts left. And from what I do have, like, I was going through it the other day, and, like, every issue that I had, like, I've spent so much time trying to actively repress this era of my life that my memories are real fuzzy. So I'm glad I have something to, like, look at.
Yeah.
But I was looking at these, like, writing assignments they give you on, you know, your full-time punishments. You have to write these horrible writing assignments about why you were this or that, or, you know, why do you hate yourself? Why are you a terrible person? If you're depressed, you know, you're a victim, right?
Of course.
You know, why are you a victim to everything in the world? And so I'm, like, reading my writing assignments and some other notes that I had, and it's like every single thing that was brought up as an issue for me was probably a factor of having untreated ADHD.
Yeah.
You know, and, like, if I had just been treated correctly, I wouldn't have had to go through all of this, maybe.
Definitely. How was the food at CEDU?
Oh, it was awful.
Okay.
It was awful. I mean, especially because, like, at the military school, like the food was really, really good.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
it was like a hotel buffet. You know, like it was really good. They had like every cereal imaginable, and like bacon and eggs and sausage and hash browns, and it was really good. And CEDU was like, you know, low tier Cisco food. But the absolute worst thing was on Saturdays they had what they called smorgy, and it was the leftovers from the entire week.
Oh hell no.
So like, I, like it's insane just thinking about it. Like 5-day old leftover beef stroganoff, and like, you know, like I don't want to eat. This is disgusting. So I like would not eat on Saturdays because it was horrendous, absolutely horrendous.
Okay. Let's see.
They a lot of things there sort of revolved around food and the cafeteria, the dining room. Like your punishments often were having to do dishes and or like pots and pans in the kitchen, because
Mhm.
the kitchen staff would come in and they cook the food and then they would go home for the night, and you know you're just left with all the plates and the glasses and everything else. Um, and there were people who like used either like access, because when you got to go eat, everybody was assembled in the main house, and there was a person who was in charge of selecting an area to go eat first. And you know, sometimes they would run out of good stuff. So there was like gatekeeping by this person there. And then on the other end of things, when you had to clean, there were these people who were psychotic about cleaning.
Oh my god.
Like there was this one kid in particular who would get eye level with the floor.
Oh my
You know what
god.
I mean? And like, look, it's like there's a crumb there. Like redo the whole floor. Like every table, he's getting eye level with it.
Oh my god.
I mean, like absolutely insane. The, I mean, and it's like, what are you going to clean with? Because you got a bunch of like, you know, kids who have issues here, right? So you can't have like chemicals.
Yeah.
And they would make us clean the windows of this enormous lodge, which was Walter Houston's like cabin, right? I mean, it was massive. It was huge. All of these windows, you know, for the beautiful scenery. And they make us clean all of the windows with vinegar and newspaper.
Wow.
And it's just hundreds of windows, and you're like cleaning it, and then the, you know, the newspaper just like falls apart and leaves all this crap all over the window, and you got to keep cleaning it and cleaning it and cleaning it. Like that was like everything was a Sisyphean task there. You, your work duty was breaking apart a rock. Like they made me like, here's a giant boulder, like get rid of it. And, you know, like hitting it with a sledgehammer, and it was always something that you could never really complete. They never intended you for you to complete it,
Yep. By design.
because
Yep.
that gave them infinite time to punish you.
Yep. How many times did you run away from CEDU?
3 or
Try.
4,
Okay.
um, all different manners of trying. Um, Once I went down what they call the backside, which is just steep wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I spent the night in a manzanita bush because I probably made it 20% down. And it was dark and I couldn't see anything. And I ended up going back in the morning. And for my efforts, I got a tick in my leg, which the nurse there tried to remove and failed so horribly that I had the head like stuck in my leg. Like I could see the little tick head in there for years.
Wow.
Once I tried just walking down the road and got unlucky enough to have a staff member pass by and got picked up. One time was the time I was just chilling on the mountain for a few days. And then I guess the last time I had called my friend because I knew there was a phone that was accessible in like the barn art area down the road.
Yeah.
And so I waited some hours in the night and went down there and called my friends. I was like, come get me. Like I snuck in $20. I got money for gas. Like just come get me. Here's how you get here. Because I had absolutely memorized the path, right? And all the directions they needed. And one of my friends wasn't very keen about it. And the other was, but he ran out of gas halfway up the mountain.
Oh, hell no.
So I was out there all night, like waiting in the cold, and had to kind of like sheepishly walk back the next day. And I didn't find out what happened until years later.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. What about grooming towards students by staff? Did you witness or hear about any of that type of thing?
You know, there was always kind of a vibe with some people. Usually I'm right about that kind of stuff, but I never like witnessed or was told about or propositioned or anything. There were things that were very creepy practices, like what they called smushing, which is where people just kind of like lay on each other, either on the floor or on a couch or something, which is always very uncomfortable. You know, you end up laying on someone's stomach or something, and it's, you know, gurgling constantly. Or
Did that make intimacy kind of weird or like
no,
strange for you?
not really. I already don't like being touched by people.
Okay.
You know, so the people that it's okay, it's okay. You know, but generally speaking, like I don't like hug people really, or you know, want them touching me.
Okay.
Like my memory's so fuzzy. I had a bunch of notes here to go over, and I feel like I'm missing something, but I don't know what it is.
So good. Maybe it'll come to you, or if you remember, we can add it into the video. It's not a big deal. What do you think the hardest part about you being at CEDU was for you? How did you deal with it?
Every day. I mean, like every day was the worst day of my life, pretty much. I didn't know about the term masking at the time, but I was doing that 100% of the time, and it was exhausting. And eventually, you know, it would culminate in something happening, either lashing out or running away or something. Like I was in trouble all the time.
Okay.
They had punishments that had a matter of degrees. One was a table, where you had to go sit at a table in the dining room pretty much all day long except for going to school. and they would give you writing assignments you had to do, and like, oh, you need to read this book and it'll help you grow. And uh, the escalated version of that was called a full time, where you didn't go to classes and you had work assignments all day. And both of these included the rules of not being able to smile or look at anyone or talk to anyone. No touching anyone. Like you were physically and socially cut off.
Yeah.
From the entire rest of the school. Maybe that's what it was. The social situation in the school was really weird too, because the people who were like the cool kids or whatever, right? Like they weren't necessarily the ones who were more committed to the program.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were lots of people who were very committed and were still like lower on the totem pole. And it created a weird dynamic. Like I went the time I was there, Kari Bunn was there also.
Okay.
But she doesn't remember me at all. Like we spent like a year in the same place.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like there was like groups of people that like you were friends with, or you were forced to be in a social group together.
Mm-hmm.
And there were all of these little groups throughout the whole school.
Like clicky.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it was cliquey, but like the rules there were like, you're not supposed to be a dick to people, you know? Like you need to be inclusive of everyone. And lots of times I saw people doing that, like being very inclusive to people that they hated. And like,
Yeah.
I know for a fact that you hate this person, and like you're willing to like help them out with stuff, right? So it was like a subtext, you know, just kind of an undercurrent that ran through the social dynamics of the entire place. There were, it felt like if you were in a certain team member's family, you were a little more important.
Yeah.
It
There
could
was
have just,
favorites. There was
yeah,
favorites. Yep.
and it could have just been that like my team leader was a fucking knucklehead. So, um, I mean, like maybe one of the dumbest people I've ever met. Which didn't like help at all, because like I can't take instruction from somebody that I had absolutely no respect for.
Totally. Totally. I feel that. Yeah.
Like I can feel that I'm smarter than someone, but I can, if like that doesn't have anything to do with like respecting them, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So like I can follow instructions from people that like I you know, I think I'm smart, and like they're dumb, but uh, if there's level of respect and understanding there, I could kind of be okay with it. But he was neither smart or worthy of respect, and he was a former student that came back to like, you know, be a staff member, and I don't know how they made him a family head, but they did.
Okay. um.
What was, you asked about grooming?
Yep.
Sorry, I wax philosophical sometimes about these things. I didn't see anything, but like the vibe was there. Like,
Okay. Okay. I'm sure I know what happened. So it's one of those things that you felt, but you never saw or heard about directly.
yeah, but and because they were always obsessed with teenagers having sex, you know what I mean? Like, you'd get into raps and profits, and half of it, especially towards the girls, would be yelling and accusing the girls of being whores, and sluts and whatever, and was like, this is really all they seem to care about.
Yeah, it's perverted.
They really didn't want certain girls and boys talking to each other. There was like code words for whether you were feeling something for another person, regardless of whether either of you would ever act upon it, right?
Yeah.
Or how with the program you were. Just the fact that you had those feelings was not okay. And they would physically separate you. They put you on bans. You couldn't look at them, couldn't talk to them, couldn't talk about them with other people.
What was the hardest part about reintegrating into society after you got out? What have you struggled with the most?
There's probably 3 or 4 things that are real difficult. One is trusting anybody.
I feel that.
Because I think Kari said in the episode she did with you that the staff could have left that place and we would have been fine, because it was so self-policing, and you were encouraged to rat anyone out who did anything wrong. And if you didn't, and let's say you were like sort of in the upper class, you would get in more trouble than the person who broke their agreements did, or was, what do they call it? Out of contract or something.
Yeah.
You would get in more trouble than they did because you didn't put a stop to it, or just because you were a witness. I don't know. You didn't prostrate enough before the staff member that you told. So trusting people is it's real rough. There's layers. Like, you have to have like a masked persona of a person that you play in the world. But this is how I handle it, and it's not like you're trying to be somebody else. It's still you, but it's limited facts and limited parts of your personality. Limited vocabulary even. And so I had to learn to kind of compartmentalize like how open I could be with that stuff.
Exactly.
With different people. And it takes a long time. So I'm like, feel comfortable enough, right?
Definitely.
And losing basically 2 years in my teens, I've like, you miss out on just like the culture at large. Like, I was up in North Idaho when OJ went on his famous car ride.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't hear about that until like 2 months later. And we're like, you didn't hear about OJ? It's like, well, no, what happened with OJ? So I missed like 2 years of whatever everybody else was getting into. And especially when you're like 13 or 14 and you're just starting to mature into your own tastes, you don't get the chance to like start from where you were and make a natural progression through things, right?
Yeah.
By the time you are out of a program like that and you come home, your friends have had 2 years to like listen to like old punk rock and now new punk rock, and they've found something that you've never even heard of now. And so I felt very behind. It's like missing the first day of school sometimes, because I could never catch up to where they were. I had 2 years of history basically to cover.
Yeah.
And there wasn't like the internet then, so it's not like I could just go look it all up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to like act like an idiot, like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. What is it?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and the third way was probably just in general trying to figure out how I was going to be like a normal human at some point. You know, because I didn't want to stay mad at my parents forever. Um, I I didn't want this experience to be like too defining of the rest of my life. And the way I dealt with that was I just buried it, you know? I pretended it didn't happen. I think my parents were happy to pretend it didn't happen. Um, you know, it was just kind of like a demarcation in time, and then we're moving on from there. And
Yeah.
we won't talk about that anymore. And it wasn't until like I was having my first kid when a lot of this stuff started coming back. Because you know now I'm thinking about, oh, I'm gonna have a child. Okay, great. And then it starts coming. You know, like, how am I gonna parent? Oh shit! Like, my parents fucked up a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, how do I not fuck up like that?
Yeah. Exactly.
Which brought lots of memories coming back. And so I went back into therapy, and luckily, like, I found a therapist who was awesome, and like
Cool.
she understood everything. She believed, she'd heard about schools like this. She knew what I was talking about. She was still aghast at a lot of the events, um, but you know, like, she got it. And she has ADHD too, and she understand what it's like to grow up with that. And you know, with all the extra research that's been done since then, you know, you have a good picture of like what the signs and symptoms look like as far as behavior, and not just being, you know, wild for no reason.
Yeah. Okay.
So just moving on was really hard. Um, I I had to revisit things, you know, and that's been difficult because I had blocked out so many of these memories that it was hard to recover things. So I went on Facebook and was trying to, you know, see if there were any people around that I still knew, and found a couple of the CEDU groups. And um, when I watched Kari's episode with you, you know, like, it unlocked all kinds of memories for me, and it was helpful just to be able to wrap my head around it a little better. You
Oh,
know?
good. I'm glad that the video was able to help you. That's what they're there for, and I'm
Yeah.
glad.
Thank you for doing this. It's, I think, very important for everyone who is in a program, or maybe even their parents are considering one.
Definitely. Yeah, it's important work for sure. Did you and thank you. I super appreciate you. I really do. Um, were you ever made to admit to things that you never did, or were you pressured to do that at CEDU?
No, because I lied about a lot of shit, just trying to like find where I could fit in, you
Okay.
know, and not be hassled, because that's mostly been my goal in life, is to not be hassled.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Um, so I tried a lot of different things, and so, you know, I was always accused of being a liar about one thing or another, because I mean, it was true, but also, you know, they didn't believe anything I said
Yeah.
at a certain point. But then there was nowhere to like go with that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
This is like, okay, lied about not doing drugs. Okay, yes, but now you're lying about doing drugs. So which is it?
Yeah, yeah. Yep. But at the same time, then you can kind of be like, which one is it? You know, I guess we'll never know. You know?
Yeah, but I mean, in my head, I was saying that, but I couldn't do that outwardly because,
Yeah.
I mean, like I was 14,
Yeah.
you know, I I didn't know anything, and I was scared of all of these people, and there was always like the constant threat of being sent somewhere worse,
Definitely.
like Provo. Like Provo was like a real place, but also like a urban myth, you know. Like people would talk about it and the horrible things that would happen there, and you don't ever want to get sent there. And it was always like the sword of Damocles that was hanging over your head, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I couldn't tell you if I got anything out of the program, really, um,
That's totally fine.
because I don't think that kind of therapy works for me in the first place.
I don't think it works for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it worked for some people. You know, there's all kinds of people that loved being there, and they loved what they got out of it, and they were so happy to be a part of it. And you know, like that's fine for them, right? Like if they really believe that. Like I know they did serious brainwashing, and I know that they used techniques that they used, you know, in China in the 50s.
Yeah.
Uh, you you own the language, you own the mind, you know,
Yeah.
because your ideas and your thoughts can only be expressed in that language with that vocabulary. And so all of your ideas are limited to what they have deemed acceptable.
Yeah. Exactly. Um, where are you with in regards to your parents? Have you watched the program?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you tried to get your parents to watch it? Have you tried telling your parents how this place affected you? I've forgiven my parents. I'll never forget what they did to me. Where are you with your parents?
Well, my dad passed away several years ago, so
Rest in
um,
peace.
yeah, that one's out. Um, I I never wanted an apology. Um, I think, like my parents, they met at in the program EST, which was
Interesting.
a 70s, like, you know, boomer self-help thing when they were trying to get, you know, all tough love on themselves. um, and my dad was older, and he's from Oklahoma, and he was born in the 1930s, and he had, you know, he had a rough life, like literally like grapes of wrath kind of situation. And I think the era that he came from, you know, that's it was all tough love because life was tough, and you know, they're like Southern Baptists, right? And they don't believe in fun. Um, like he told me once he got in trouble in school, and as he was walking home, every house he passed of his neighbors, each one of them gave him a paddle
Wow.
because they'd all heard about it. Um, so I don't think I would have made any inroads trying to explain the program itself or the things that I went through or the things that they made you do. I don't know that they would consider them all that bad. You
Okay.
know, it's not worthy of being called abuse, probably.
Okay.
And so I've never sought an understanding or apology. Um, I've just tried to try to make what I had work while while I could.
Okay.
And um, I don't bring it up with my mom now. I feel similarly to what you said. You know, I forgive them, but I won't forget. It's impossible to, really.
All right. And are you going to tell your kids what happened to you?
Someday they'll find out. I mean, if I have to use it someday to be like, here's what can happen to you.
Yeah.
You know, like if you don't get your PCs consolidated, this is the kind of thing that can happen to you. And at some point, your mom and I have no control over it.
Yeah.
You know, at some point you will be out of the range of our decision making. And you know, I mean, that's frightening to me, but also, you know, I just try to trust that we'll do a good enough job that we can, you know, prevent something like that from happening. Because, I mean, like, the things that led me there were I was getting in trouble, you know, I was sneaking out, and I tried every drug I could get my hands on, which wasn't very many, but, like, I mean, smoking pot was enough to, like, make my parents go crazy.
Yep. Same with mine. Yep.
And if I felt like they had given me some leeway or some understanding, not just flying off the handle, because it's like, if you do this, then you are that, right? If you smoke pot, then you're a drug addict.
Yeah.
I mean, even at 13, I knew that was absolutely ridiculous statement to make, you know, just as a general statement. And, you know, if I had had some understanding, if they had had some experience with things, you know, or they had resources, you know, I'd like to think that maybe all of it could have been avoided. And so that's what, you know, I'm trying to do with my kids, you know, make sure that, like, I understand what's happening. I can be empathetic enough to put myself in their position and try and understand. I mean, they're still very young, but I mean, my hope is that by the time they're teenagers, we'll have a relationship where they won't be afraid to tell me things for fear of not just reprisal or punishment, but judgment.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. And if you could go back, or hold on a sec. What do you think would have helped you instead of being sent away?
Well, I mean, the first would be being treated for the condition which I actually had, which was ADHD, you know, which caused the depression secondhand. Um, that would have been a good start. You know, I think there was some malpractice on the part of psychiatrists um, uh, and doctors that I had to see. Um, but you know, that's 30 years ago, so it's hard to know. Um, that that would have been the best start, but also embracing things that I liked and not. It's like I really wanted to, like, be a musician, and it was very frowned upon to do anything artistic. And get this, even though my mom is an artist, and that's how she made her living, and um, you know, I guess she didn't want that for me, but she didn't want that for me in the way that she did it, right?
Yeah.
Not the way that I might have done it. I remember at Ascent, when I was part of my, pleased to not be sent to CEDU, I was like, can I go to like an art school, or like this is what I want to do. This is what I'm interested in, and I just never got the opportunity. So I try to make up for lost time now, best I can.
We do what we can.
Yeah.
If you, knowing what you know now, if you could go back in a time machine and not go through either Ascent or CEDU, would you do it? Why?
It might sound weird, but I'd probably would go the first time to Ascent.
Okay. Why the first time?
Because it was just hard labor, but also it was hard labor that was only purposed towards being self-sustaining, because you used the wood that you chopped, to heat the teepees and to build fires and to cook the food, and you hauled the water so that you had water to drink.
Out of necessity.
Yeah. And I mean, forgive me for being a little too much into Henry David Thoreau, but it's like living simply and sucking the marrow from life, or whatever it is. There's something that's very nice about that, and I enjoyed learning how to do those things a little bit. I mean, it sucked occasionally, but now I know a whole lot about felling trees and sawing wood, and I'd never done anything like that before. Knew a lot about backpacking and survival skills and whatnot, which was, I enjoyed learning, if not helpful. But everything after that, and if I had to give that up to do none of it, I would definitely do that.
Okay.
Because it was not worth losing 2 years of my life when I was just figuring out who I was, and it took a long time to get back where I should have been. I faced a seriously arrested development because of that. And I mean, luckily, like, I got through high school fine, went to college, and
credits transferred.
I had to do summer school every year.
Okay.
But I didn't have to do anything extra, so I still graduated when I was supposed to.
All right.
And I enjoyed school, which was weird, but there it is. I enjoyed my high school experience after that, and then I went to college and I ate lots of LSD and mushrooms, and that helped a lot. It really helped a lot.
Okay. And knowing, go ahead.
I really wish mushrooms were legal here, because like the only times I've ever not been kind of depressed in my life were a few weeks after eating mushrooms.
Yeah,
just
I microdose. It really does help.
Does it?
Yeah. At least it helps me.
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt free from the burdens of my own mind, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it helps you like disconnect, kind of, but you're still there, but it helps your body like disconnect. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And so now I smoke a lot of weed, and
Me too. Yeah.
um, that helps.
Yeah.
Not as much, but it helps.
Okay. Knowing what you know now, is it your belief that these remaining schools should or even could be fully regulated, or is it your belief that they all need to be shut down?
I feel like maybe the answer is yes to both of those. Um, I I think they all need to be shut down. We need to go back to zero,
Yeah.
And but I do think there's merit in certain kinds of programs for certain kinds of kids,
Yeah.
because I do believe there are people who went to a lot of these programs who think they're great and, learned a lot and became a much more full and rich person, inwardly than they would have otherwise. And never, I mean, never have I seen the like idea that perception and perspective is so different person to person than talking to people and reading about people talking about CEDU. Because I know what it was like for me. I know what it was like for other people. I know some people feel they were brainwashed, like they liked it for a time and they've come to realize that it was bad, right? But I also think there's lots of people who got a lot out of it, and I'm willing to accept all of those things being true.
Totally.
I think there's a huge mental health crisis in this country still, and um, 4 years of Donald Trump did not help that.
No.
I think it emboldened a lot of people to dismiss all kinds of things,
Oh, definitely. Yep.
and it gets worse and worse and worse, and there's no solution for it, really. The government won't handle it. They won't try to make mental health a priority. Um, they won't try to make protection of children a priority, and it's really sad to see that a lot of people see life as a zero sum thing, and if other people are granted freedom, it means that their freedom is being taken away from them somehow, as if freedom is a finite resource.
Yeah.
Um, and I certainly think that schools like CEDU, in some way, could be regulated and beneficial for certain kinds of kids.
Yeah. Okay.
But you try to put the square pegs in the round hole, and you end up with a lot of broken people.
Yep. Okay. And is there anything else you want people to know about your experience, or anything that you might tell a parent thinking about sending their kid to a place like this?
Yeah, just don't say no. Say no to these schools. Um, if I hadn't had the problem with the other kids at the military school, like I would have enjoyed that. Um, I'm sure there's some resource out there that is there that can be used instead of putting your child into a program like this. Anything that says emotional growth, anything that promises they're going to turn your child into a productive member of society, they're all lying to you.
Yep. Too good to be true.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Like if you say we're going to teach your kid A, B, C, and D skills and they will be prepared for life, That is very different.
Yeah.
To me.
Yep. It's like, tell me exactly how you're going to fix my kid. Give me bullet points, what you're going to do, and give me the evidence behind it that shows that this is evidence-based research.
Absolutely. And especially when you get into like the emotional growth side of it, it's all bets are off, because you're talking about, you're promising one program that can fix all of the kids. And that is just total horseshit.
Yep, completely.
That will never happen.
Yep, never. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you, sir.
On the
Appreciate
show.
it.
And if you guys have watched this far in the video, please like the video, comment it, subscribe if you're not already, and hit the notification bell for all updates. Anything that interacts with the video helps the algorithm. Let's get the word out about these places and get them fucking shut down or regulated. And I want to extend an invitation. If you think of things that come up after this, take some notes. We'll do part 2. Okay.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much
it.
for coming on, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye.